Hi everyone, this is Mr. W. This lesson is on decimals, part 3, hundredths. Decimal number is any number that is on the right side of the decimal point. Highlight our decimal point. So for example, we have here 0 decimal for 2, and the 4 and the 2 are on the right side of the decimal point. And these we refer to as decimal numbers. The 0, on the other hand, is not a decimal. The 0 is on the left side. And in this case, the 0, this is a whole number. We would read this number as 42 hundredths. And the 2 is in the hundredths place value, the 4 is in the tenths, and the 2 is in the hundredths. And when we read decimals, we say the name of the last digit. So in this case, 42, the 2 is in the hundredths place value, and we would read that as 42 hundredths. A hundredth is one equal part, 100 parts. So for example, our fraction here is 42 hundredths, and the blue part here would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 41, 42, shaded in blue, out of a total of 100 of the fraction. Good. It's important that you be able to make the connection between fraction and decimals, and we do that by dividing. So for example, we divide the top number, the numerator, so 42, divided by our bottom number, the denominator, and you can see that equals 0 decimal 42. So 42 hundredths, as in fraction form with a numerator and denominator and fraction bar, turns into decimal form, and we would read that as 42 hundredths. So they are both read the same way. So why do we need decimals? The reason is that we often have less than a whole. For example, you can have one whole dollar, which equals 100 cents. But you may also just have a dime, which is only 10 cents out of 100. So for example, our $1 would be a whole dollar. And we would write that on the left side because it's a whole number. Our dime is less than one whole dollar. It would represent 10 cents, or in other words, 10 out of 100. So that would represent 10 hundredths. And notice that that is on the right side of the decimal point. Our number system has to have a way to show that. Each whole number increases by a multiple of 10. For example, 1, if I were to multiply by 10, well, 1 times 10 would be 10. 10 times 10 would be 100. And this would continue with each place value. It increases by a multiple of 10. On the decimal side, it's the opposite. It's decreasing, it's getting smaller. It is being divided by 10. So each of these place values are going down by a divisor of 10. I can show that to you here. So for example, 1 divided by 10 would equal our 0 decimal 1. In other words, that would be 1/10. If I take 1/10 and divide that further by 10, it equals 0 decimal 0 1, or in other words, 100. The decimal point is really important because it acts as a separator between the whole numbers to the left and the decimals to the right. It's important to be able to read decimal numbers correctly. So how we read hundredths is really easy. When you read decimal numbers, we just say the name of the decimal place value that it ends with. So for example, here you can see in our decimals, we have 2 digits each time, and the second digit is in the hundreds. So for example, this would be read 19 hundredths. We don't say the zero. We wouldn't say 0.19 or 0.19. That's simply 19 hundredths. 25 hundredths. 37 hundredths. 92 hundredths. In this case, we have a mixed number because the 2, we do have a digit to the left, and that would be in the 1. So we would read this as 2 and 63 hundredths. 15 and 48 hundredths. 77 and 8 hundredths. It's important to be able to model hundredths. So in the yellow here, we have a hundreds grid, and you don't have to usually count every single grid. You want to recognize that there's 100. You have 10 rows of 10. In this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are shaded yellow. So in fraction form, that would be 5 hundredths. Now in decimal form, there is one little trick to it. It's going to be 0 decimal. Avoid the temptation of putting your 5, because remember, our place value, the first place value is tenths. If you put the 5 here, that would read as 5 tenths. So we go 0.05 because this place value is hundreds. So that would read 500. What you don't want to do is go like that. That would be incorrect for hundreds. That would be tenths. That's one little tricky part of that. The green one would represent, I'm seeing 10, 20, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34 hundredths. And as a decimal form, it would be 0.34. I'm going to prove that to you by taking our 34, dividing by 100, and you can see that we have 0.34. The light blue represents a mixed number, so this would represent one whole. And this would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So in fraction form, it would be 1 and 50 100ths. In decimal form, we also have one whole. So 1 decimal point, and then 50. So this would be read 1 and 50 hundredths. Try one, pause if you want. Write it as a fraction and as a decimal. Okay, how'd you do? I'm seeing here that this would represent 1, and this would be a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hundredths. So in fraction form, we have a mixed number that reads 1 and 8 hundredths. In decimal form, we also have 1 decimal point. But am I going to put my 8 here? No, good job. Remember that this is 8 hundredths, so we want to bump this over to the hundredths column, and this would read as 1 and 8 hundredths. If you can avoid that mistake, that's probably the trickiest thing with hundredths, is just make sure you remember that this first place value is tenths. This next one is hundredths, so you would have to put your 0 there. Okay, I'm going to ask you to pause, write the fraction or a mixed number as a decimal. Go ahead and pause. See how you do. All right, how'd you do? 6 hundredths would be 0 decimal. Am I going to put the 6 here? No, we're going to put the 6 here in the hundredths, right? So this would read as 6 hundredths. 6 and 72 hundredths, well, that's easy. 6 decimal, and this would read 6 and 72 hundredths. 24 and 6 hundredths, we would write 24 decimal. Am I going to put the 6 here? No, that would be 6 tenths, right? So we want to put 0, 6. This would read 24 and 6 hundredths. And 45 hundredths would be 0 decimal 45. And our last one would read as 45 hundredths. All right, thanks everybody.